This is Emily Blackshear Hall with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the OSU Library. Today is Thursday, March 7th, 2019, and I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm interviewing Dr. John Yozzo for the Deep Roots Oklahoma Authors Oral History Project. John, you're a retired professor of English, a Woody Guthrie poet, and author of Only Wonder, and another book that we'll talk about.
The forthcoming.
Yeah, that's forthcoming. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
Treat to be here.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Ponca City, Oklahoma. Lived there for 20 years.
How would you describe Ponca to someone who's never been there?
Oil town, less so now than it used to be. Had two refineries when I was growing up, City Service and Continental. And since they both, it's almost nothing of refining as it used to be. Two refining towns. My father worked for Conoco, in fact, came from the University of Michigan with mom and two children in 1949 and worked for the oil company for 22 years. Grew up in Ponca City. It seemed like a really nice little place. Rather almost largish for Oklahoma. It's about 25,000 people. Has a beautiful lake, Lake Ponca, where I learned to sail and where I would still go to kayak, lake kayak anytime I can. It's a pretty lake. The town is showing its age now. I still have two siblings there, and it looks like a dusty, sad, small Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
25,000 seems like a city in Oklahoma, but people would say town.
Yeah.
I enjoyed growing up there. We were Roman Catholic. We had the school, we had the church, we had family. Our whole world was rolled up in it. The Catholic school closed my junior year. I'm a graduate of Ponca City High School. I had a wonderful 1 year there. It was strangely like going to a new town, to go to from high school with, I think, 15 in our junior class to a graduating class of 520. So the high school had about 1,700 at the time, I think. So it was, but I played football with some of these kids in middle school, grew up in various neighborhoods, so I knew quite a few of them, but it was in a way like returning to a new town. So the church was important, because they said the nuns and the priests are our parents during the day, and we went to Mass 5-6 days a week. Had Mass every day before school at St. Mary's, and then St. Mary's branched into Unity High School in 1970. No, closed in 71. So it was 1968 to 1971, and we went to classes at the Second Marlin Mansion. We had a 33-acre limestone walled campus to run around in, and it was beautiful. So, education was good. Some of my siblings couldn't wait to get out of Ponca. They found it constraining. As I think about it, it all just kind of made sense. Compact, logical, and Catholics, at that time at least, educated us very thoroughly. I felt like I had learned quite a bit. Learned Latin just before the Mass went vernacular. That kind of pissed me off. And so I write some Catholic poems. Yeah. But then they are not to be taken authoritatively at all. And a very good friend of mine, I've known since I was 6. We went first grade together. He's the Bishop of Little Rock. And I just really wouldn't want to run away. I'm not afraid that he would find them, but they're just like, oh, so that's what you were thinking about the Catholic school. And then also the erotic stuff.
Yeah.
embarrass me.
We don't want to chat about that.
I have friends I hope don't find my books. I'm not, I think it might, confound them or change their view of me.
Yeah.
And it's, poets have to maintain their lives.
That's right.
So, I don't want to be exposed.
Well, we'll talk more about that.
Okay. When I think about Ponca City, I think about that beautiful lake.
Yeah.
Call Lake came into being in the late 60s, early 70s, but I don't mean that one. That's a brown, muddy lake. Lake Ponca is beautiful. And it might be the only reason I'd ever live in Ponca City again, if I could just have that lake. Because, you go out there to smooch girls, you go out there to shoot off fireworks. My senior year after my dad died, it's where my friend Bob and I would go. You sit there and the water is soothing. And then I learned how to sail there, a small craft, 14-foot boats, and I just love that lake. There is something about sitting on water that is different from walking away. So that lake means a lot to me. I still drive the streets and go by houses we lived in, but I know.
Did you spend a lot of time there with your parents or siblings, the lake, growing up?
Well, it's not a swimming lake, and so it wasn't a day with a picnic basket, but no, but it was just a place to go. 4th of July, shoot off fireworks. I had a couple of years after my dad died, and my mom was dating a little, and so like some of the fellows she dated were sailors too, and so it was really nice to go out and do that. So that was nice. But when my 3rd year of college was kind of leaving home time, I guess, Mom packed up some recipes and some pots and pans, and I kind of knew that it wouldn't be my room upstairs anymore. That's when I moved to Tulsa in 1974. I was always welcome home, and I did claim my room upstairs, but it was that just kind of like, well, you're going to go set up your own household. You're not going to be living in dorms. It's going to be that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you were 1974, Tulsa.
Yeah,
what do you remember about Tulsa at that time? Because you live there now, right after retirement.
Yeah. Well, it was a heady place. I didn't guess I had enough money to do a lot. I don't remember going to movies. I don't remember too many restaurants. But I did. I lived just west of the university in an apartment complex that no longer exists, and went to the Catholic Church up on 1st Street, St. Francis. It's real near, for anyone who knows, so it's just like a half block from the Circle Theater, which was there at the time, but I didn't. I went there a few years later, and then it went from trash to porn before they revitalized the whole neighborhood. There was a diner down there, but I can't remember the name of it. I didn't socialize in Tulsa much. And the girls I dated, I said, look, I don't have a lot of money, so we're just going to have to do the best we can on that. And I was a pretty good, I would have dinner. I mean, making dinner for a girl was the thing.
Yeah.
One girl, she said the first time she saw my apartment, she thought it was gay because it was neat. Because I knew how to manage my household.
Live like an adult.
Yeah, really. Congratulations. Now, I will say, I don't know if you know Tulsa, but what is Cherry Street now was there was a core. There was Arnie's Bar, there was Schweigman's Laundromat, and for a short time there was a buffeteria, kind of where maybe Smoke is, or Smoke or Flame, there's something, the restaurant there. And I do remember, like, 1975, you could get a meal for $2.19 at that buffeteria. And Arnie's beers were 35 cents, but 12 ounces. And down the street was a place called the Black Forest. And there were 10-ounce beers for 35 cents. And so those are kind of important things. You could, leave your laundry at Schweigman's, go to Arnie's, have a cup of Schweigman would come in and say, hey, it's time, they keep track of you. So that part of Tulsa I was real close with. But as far as going out and eating and drinking, there was no technically liquor by the drink then anyway. You had to have club cards and then pay $5 for a drink. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So 35-cent 12-ounce beer was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then Arnie's bar, just the smoke we absorbed was just the times. But I like Tulsa because my dad was very impressed with Tulsa. I think he would have retired there. But he died the summer of 71. He was 48. But I think because of his predisposition towards Tulsa, I was predisposed to like it. And I have no, have you interviewed Ron Wallace yet?
Yes.
Does he talk about Dennis Letts a little?
Uh-huh.
See, Dennis Letts, I think Ron met Dennis a year after I did.
Oh, really?
And Dennis Letts kind of said, like, what are you doing at Oklahoma College of Liberal Arts in Chickasha? And I thought, I'm just farting around and stuff. And he said, well, you thought about going to the University of Tulsa. And Tulsa was not a place that Ponca City High kids went. OSU, tons. OU, tons. A lot of us went to NOC. I don't remember if it was the junior college thing or not. Northern Oklahoma Junior College that Bill McLeod went to was still there. My brother and sister went there too. But TU was not a Ponca City destination.
Yeah.
So Dennis Letts helped me go to Tulsa. I went for 3 terms, finished my bachelor's, went to Kansas City, came back to TU, and got my master's and PhD paid for. So there was a reason to stay. Although I did apply to other schools and was accepted, but just the money is impossible. And also Let's got Ron and me interested in Robinson Jeffers. And he shows up in our polls. Probably more so mine than Ron's, but when I read his, I'm like, hey, I know that guy. And we found Dennis Letts and Robinson Jeffers about the same time. I think we're about the same age, so we were impressionable 20-year-olds at the time. But Tulsa was that because, and I'm sorry to say this, but I just think it's, at least in my area, it was the best school in Oklahoma. I was happy to go there.
Yeah.
Happy to be able to afford it.
But did you envision studying English when you were younger? We mentioned before we started recording that your mom
I said I would be a teacher, but I wasn't really sure. I never understood how people could say what they were going to do in 4 years. So I don't know, major. So I dabbled with math and logic and philosophy before I settled in literature. And TU just has they had a phenomenal faculty. I took a lot of independent studies with people from comparative lit, and I just loved seeing what's what. I've always been a good student. I was kind of a mousy child, always the quiet one who liked to read a lot. In 1959, a woman told me this 20 years later. She recognized me. She said, "You're Johnny Yozzo." She says, "Well, I lived on this corner, and this is your block." And she said, "One day I came out, and you were hanging upside down in my pine tree on your knees reading." So I was an early reader and a spooky child.
Upside down.
I don't quite remember that, but you wouldn't probably let your 5-year-old go out and try a pine tree. Different times.
She could figure it out, I'm sure.
But my mom, she couldn't keep up with all of this. And so, but also that was on 7th Street, down towards St. Mary's, so I was waiting for my siblings to return from school. I love school. School rewarded me. The Catholic school was very good to me.
Mhm.
TU was not easy. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I breezed right through.
Yeah.
But it was. I felt very well prepared by my
Mhm.
education in Ponca City, and I enjoyed college.
What are some of your earliest memories of writing something that was creative? Were you a diary keeper, or did this poetry come
I was
some other time?
I was a mook. Not sure how I mean that, but it's what I seem to remember is true. I could construct verse for kids for our like Mother's Day projects.
Mhm.
You know, some girl, my very good friend Patricia Doyle had just weaver's hands, and she could. I'm not even saying, what do you do? What's it called? Braiding and stuff.
Mhm.
So I remember teachers said, we're going to make our mother's octopuses for Mother's Day. So I couldn't braid, I couldn't do anything, but I could write a little verse or two. And so I remember kind of helping out with that. Maybe second, third grade. By the 7th and 8th grade, I could write simpering doggerel.
Mhm.
Because, and I was thinking about this before the interview. I guess I have an ear for certain, I'd say poetic music, but I'm not musical at all. So rhythms, and it's why I don't punctuate much. I trust the reader is coming to the poem with some intent, and I practice with rhythm, so I think I had a natural ear for that. I would transcribe rock and roll songs, many of which aren't terribly deep or structured, but there was something there to play with. When I think about literary studies at St. Mary's, they were probably pretty sanitized. English poets, there certainly wasn't John Berryman or murderous or suicidal or manic depressives. We didn't get to read that stuff, but we did read poetry. But it was probably sanitized stuff. So I think maybe I had an early ear, but it was I wrote simpering stuff till I was 17. 17. I don't know. I don't consciously know why, but it happened. I really just started to try to write seriously right after my dad died. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't like I was hiding it from him. I just started then. And I have to give credit. And I've only taken 1 or 2 writing classes, and I don't recommend them. I certainly wouldn't recommend any of the 17 who took the one I taught once. But there was a woman at Ponca City Senior High. Her name was Lavelle Whitmer, and she was the creative writing homeroom teacher. And I don't remember her teaching anything towards structure. I mean, she certainly didn't. But she made us read, like The Atlantic, read the poems they published, and maybe do some imitative stuff. But she had us reading, and that's what I remember was best about her, the creative writing at homeroom. And that year, I started trying poetry more and more. It's sad here. I had a notebook of poems in October of 1971 that I left at the Russell Stover store in the plaza in Kansas City.
Oh no.
So who knows what, I mean, most of it's doggerel, I'd be ashamed, but it's lost doggerel, so that's important.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, I was writing then. I was writing probably stuff all the time. Whether it was good or not, I don't know. But I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it started. That's when I started to kind of trust. I have a few. I find them occasionally. Okay, I guess they show promise. I won a couple of awards. I won a little scholarship or a pin or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to be kind, the judges were reading it. So not bad for 17-year-old stuff.
Oh, okay.
You know that? Yeah. There are phenomenal writers out there. There was a young woman in Ada, and she was writing when she was 14. It was just stunning. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where that comes from, because I probably just wrote like a 17-year-old. Mm-hmm. I used to worry about writing all the time, and I kind of got away from that. Just don't have to write all the time. I don't believe in keeping a notebook. Mm-hmm. The poem in the Gaining Nuts Out, I worked in my head for a year and a half. Really? And of course, I couldn't even tell you what the earlier versions were because I didn't keep them. Mm-hmm. I just worked it. So I don't write things down. I don't think so.
How do you know that you've got it? Once you are writing it down after you've spent all that time. Kind of
I don't take pen down. I don't write until it's about 95% done, and then it does come out. I mean, start to finish, I put down a stance and then fill it in. It just comes out. I know that sounds like romantic twaddle. Yes, the visionary gleam. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But it's just the rhythm of my biking, my bicycle, dodge buses and cars and stuff. But I'm working on things.
Do you read it out loud? Because you're kind of working through a draft.
Usually when I'm done, kind of to reward myself. I feel pretty, when I do put one down, I feel pretty good about it. So maybe I'll go bother Rita with it, but she's kind of like my mom in that I don't bother her too much. Yeah. She doesn't. I don't just write to her for reward. I'm not going to get a sugar cube. And in fact, she said, I wrote one last week and read it to her, and she just kind of went, well, that's just all over the place. That's the first time in a very long time. Just like, well, okay. It wasn't a serious poem. But anyway, she'll say that.
Yeah. So when did you meet her?
We met on a blind date.
Really?
We were both going nowhere emotionally.
Yeah.
Her friend from Oklahoma, she lived in Oklahoma City at the time. Her friend married a friend of mine. And Rita was on a moratorium from dating when she met me, and I was working in a cemetery in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and not meeting a lot of people to go out with. So what Rita got was, he's an English major, he writes poetry, and he works in a cemetery. And she worked for the government in Oklahoma City, and so we met. We went to Jamil's for our first date, and we celebrate July 2nd, 1976. Yeah, that was the day we met. So there's a poem in the new book, Brahms, about our second date.
Oh, yeah.
So,
some ice cream.
What? Yeah.
Brahms? Like,
for ice cream.
Yeah. For ice cream. Oh.
Yeah, we weren't hoping for much. It was kind of like, don't be a jerk, and I won't be a jerk. I was pretty unlucky in love. It might give you something to write about, but it's just not a way to go.
Yeah.
There are some screw you poems in each of the books, but these they're really not very satisfying. I figure you ought to have some laughs. Make fun of yourself before Facebook gets a hold of you. I just, anyway.
Yeah, but she was with you. When did you get
Um,
married? Because I noticed a dedication
yeah,
to her in your dissertation.
we married 3.5 years later.
Okay.
I'm proud of the fact we're both very stable people and kind of boring. And we joke about that. Somebody along the way said, that you need to put your hands into the fire and, and live life. So we were talking about burnt hands on the way over here today. Just like, what do they get to get your burnt hands? I'm not a risk taker. Rita's not a risk taker. We bought a house before we decided to marry. It was a practical thing to do. So I said, well, I can pony up about 20%. You've got a full-time job. And let's see what we can do. And we did. And our families were bugging us about this and that, but we knew.
Yeah.
We knew. So we met in 76, we married in 80, just had our 39th anniversary. And I couldn't really tell you what Rita thinks of the poems I write to her because she's kind of shy about them. She'll keep it to herself.
What year did you move to Ada to be a professor?
1987.
1987.
Had 4 years in Birmingham, Alabama before that, and that was a non-tenured position. So Ada, 1987. Everybody plans, I'll just be there a few years and stayed 23. 23. I took my first opportunity, with Rita's help too. She's very good at numbers. She worked for the IRS. When she helped me determine my first eligibility, we decided to jump. 23 years was enough. I left on a good note. I think I probably have 2 just blazing years ahead of me even, but I could have managed. I loved what I did on the 3rd floor of Horace Mann. Ada's not a village I would recommend people to retire to. Doesn't even have a pretty lake. It's smaller than Ponca City. It doesn't have a pretty lake. So when we got our first opportunity, because Rita had retired before, and we had our house ready to sell and let's go. So we bought a house in Tulsa, moved Rita, and 6 months later I retired. And we had sold our house, closed up. And it worked out. Yeah. It worked out. Might surprise people in Ada that I'm a poet. I don't know. I read occasionally, but not gangbusters. And I've always written. I just haven't really worried about sharing it. And I'll borrow a line from Jeffers on that. He said he never worried about an audience, something like that. Just had to say what he had to say, and didn't. What was your approach to teaching poetry at school? Well, I taught one creative writing class, and that was like, if you see talent, stay the hell out of its way. And so I cannot. It was more of a poetry class for 17 people, and we wrote some. The 3 A's I gave were just phenomenal, erotic writers, and we kind of sat in our workshop and said, "That's a very good poem." I go, wow, yeah. Anyone want to, So happening in Ada. Well, it was a night class. But I didn't know what I was doing, and I said, "Oh, here, would you do this?" And I took 1.5 writing classes in college, and I have opinions about how that goes. Is it teachable? I don't know. I think what it does is it kind of builds the mentor-pupil system. And then what is the word for whom a mentor mentors? That's where my Manatee poem came from. I said, "You're my Manatee." It's not mentee. I don't think that's a word. Of course, we can ruin language anytime. And we make up words. I know it's great, but mentee sounds ridiculous. So that's where Manatee came. So I started a poem about Aristotle and Socrates and Alexander's Great, like to hell with that. I think, and I'm sorry, it's prejudice to me. A well-known writer teaching writing wannabes can't help but impart too much of itself upon the student. And then there's that kind of, if you're going to play the mentor system, then you're going to have a mentor your whole life. It seems to me. You will always owe homage. I'm not that kind of person. And there were professors at TU who were that way, but then there were also professors who were not. And I aligned myself with professors in my doctoral work who were ready to give me the benefit of the launch, but not to require payment for the rest of my life. I'm just not that kind. It's okay if it works. It's fine.
Yeah.
But that's what I see. It's kind of a take it or leave it with a poem. If you start messing with it, then we're collaborating. Okay, you did this, I did this, and now it's not my poem. It's our poem. That'd be wonderful, but it's not what I gave you. So I don't know. I have a very mixed mind about how people are taught writing.
Yeah.
I think you can teach yourself a lot of things. Kind of like I used to tell my students, you go to a library and start reading, you can learn a lot. Maybe a little directed reading might help, but simply if you start reading some books, you'll figure out the world. So I don't know. We're not running out of poets. And I say poets first. I love poets. I love the medium. You can read more poets, even in my books, 100 pages, but you can read a lot more than fiction faster. And at this point in my life, I want to read a lot of poetry. And then I have my favorites. I've still got 4, 5, 6 bookshelves at home, and a lot of poets. A lot of poets I would like to reread. I need a new Dream Songs by Berryman, for instance. I've worn out the old one twice, probably. I just like reading. I still don't understand what they all mean. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I will not say I ever really finished all the plays of Shakespeare either. I finally just gave the book away, but I'm just not going to get back to it.
But that's okay.
Robinson Jeffers said he would never be as good a poet as Milton, and I will never be as good a poet as Robinson Jeffers. But I love picking up books and just going, wow, I couldn't have written that poem. I'm a big fan of Jessica Isaacs.
Yes.
Not just because she was a good friend of mine. I've known her half her life, but because just like, where did this come from? That's why I read poetry. I like mine. I like reading it, but not all the time. And then struggling to get this thing out in the next 3 weeks is really.
Yeah. So your first book, Only Wonder, had about 100 poems, right? And the second one has around that many.
I think like Only Wonder at 94, so it was 96 or vice versa. Something
still,
like that.
A lot. And I think we were kind of talking before the interview about Only Wonder and how the subtitle is Poems of Love, which I remember listening to you read from that book last year at Scissortail, and I thought, wow, that's kind of a gutsy way to introduce yourself, because when we think of love, it's such a
I read,
kind of abstract. Yeah.
Well,
and there's so many different.
I try to write a good love
interpret.
poem.
Yeah.
That's when I try to write a poem that somebody would write for me. I don't think anyone's. It's just, oh my God. And then I don't mind if somebody just steals it and uses it for his beloved. I think it works for gay and straight. Love's love. The flush of sex works. I mean, I don't think it has. I just try to hit that gut feeling, that gut punch of awe. Or wow.
Yeah.
Shortest love poem, duh. But boy, there's just something about it. I don't, and they are, thematically. Well, I'm not doing literary research anymore.
Yeah.
So thematically, I haven't taken my poems apart. I could schematize them in all directions. I could just chronologize and say, why is the book put together this way? But so they're not all love lyrics, but I can't paint. But if you focus, every writer says, well, get down to earth, get to focus, get to the thing. So if you can't just focus on the face of your beloved and write a poem, then I don't know, go buy somebody else's book and use it. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Who doesn't? Who can't use that poem?
Right.
So it's I don't know how many of them are actually love lyrics.
It's a matter of, I guess, how someone would want to read into things and approach it. There were a few when I was reading through the book and thinking about love and what it could mean or what it might mean in the context of a long-term relationship.
I was thinking long-term.
Not everything is easy. In fact, love can be quite hard or painful.
I think there are a few more of those poems in the second book.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah. My brother, my family's been very supportive of the book, which has kind of surprised me. But one of my older brothers said the book that he's read is like it's kind of like teenage. It's infatuated. He said, "What's the second one like?" I said, "It's probably a little more sober. It's got some middle marriage poems of question, not anger poems or anything, but just there's something maybe more somber. I'm not sure. Not sure. There's always that moment of wow. I was talking with Dorothy a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, I can't help but kind of marvel at breasts in my poem. She said, everybody. She said, we all marvel at breasts. She said, breasts are the wow. And so that's why breasts turn up in a couple of poems, just like, here she is asleep, and I'm watching her sleep.
Yeah.
Kind of, I told my students is, I never thought I would have a mate. Never thought I'd have my own woman. Never really expected that. A good friend of mine, who is a world-renowned painter, was surprised when she heard that I'm married. She said, you were always so self-reliant. We always kind of figured you would never need anybody else. Because I was afraid I'd never meet anybody else. I don't know. And it's not like, I cling to Rita, just drain the living life out of squeeze her for sustenance. I carry my share of chores and stuff.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been horrible for her to be married to a poet. She knows more about my poetry than anybody else, but she just, it's part of my gloominess at times, my goofiness at times. So.
Yeah, how does she support your creativity or encourage you?
She would say she doesn't at all, but last few years she's been a little more evident. Not sure. She has never seen me read.
Really?
She only saw me teach once, and that was like my second year. I don't know why I even bothered her then. I took her to a comp class. She sat in the back and saw that. She doesn't come out for readings.
If you could pick a poem to read to her that you've written, what would it be?
Mazama. Mazama, because that's where the poem was composed, and it was an anniversary poem from one of our summer sleepovers.
Yeah.
It says, I can remember the occasion that I referred to in that poem. I believe it was August 7th, 1976. And so I say 20 years ago or something.
Okay, is this the right one?
Uh-huh.
Do you mind reading it?
That's a city in northern Washington.
Mhm.
We'd come over from Seattle and found a little cabin or something. We were with friends. And that's part of these are the stars of Mazama that Debbie put on the cover. Rita just remembers the stars were so bright that they were just almost,
Oh yeah, I was going to
pressing
ask
our
about that
eyesight.
cover and
Well, I just,
chose that one.
Debbie did this all by herself. I
Yeah.
just said, well, there were the stars in Mazama, and then the last poem's about a pickup truck that's really about Rita and stuff like that. Yeah, I think the last line is stolen from some poem, but I don't know which one. Well, maybe Ted Levine or someone's gonna let me know. He's an actor, isn't he? Yeah.
We'll see.
Mazama is just where it was. Mazama. The passage of time sits me humbly down to recall this night years ago, you fully naked, sheeted, sleeping trustful, so perfectly our first month went. We were impetuous and young in a Victorian betrothal. You, sleeping, a child with finger to her lips, made calm the night, and perfect our musted, grown-up urgings. Me now as then, easily distracted by your slumbering form, yes, breasts, and the iridescent innocence of your face, which saved me then from pitiless confusions, which now endears me when the year's passage saddens but redeems. Victorian betrothal, I think, is, if I remember what I thought I meant by that, it means just it took us a while to get to, committing. But I do remember that was probably 5 weeks after we met. So I think on the 7th of August, we met on the 2nd of July. And she likes that poem. Yeah. She likes that poem. The poem's about doubt. And the poems that some friends have asked about, like say, is this about infidelity? And I'll say no, but they're very dark poems. You have to, as I said earlier, I'm not somebody who puts his hands in fires. Yeah. But I do have, I can imagine stuff. And I'll make a bad joke. I've been to class reunions where there's a lot of fraught with peril. Just, I don't know, a lot of sadness in the world and the wreckage that we make. I feel really bad for poets alive and dead who have so many regrets. I mean, just the drinking, the pouring, the cruelties, oh my gosh, the drama. Right. So write a poem that you hope will at least be peaceful. No, but I mean, I remember what I read last year in Scissor Tail. It was about the flip side of the love poems, the breaking up poems. Yeah, that's right. And then nobody knows how to say goodbye anymore. Break something for crying out. I mean, I was always the second out of the relationship. I was just wait forever, and I guess maybe I was checking the furniture or writing up a poem or something. But I was always the one getting left. Like old Yeller will be repaid for his loyalty, and that's horseshit.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Now I remember.
Yeah, that's what that was.
Wait, these are love poems. Wait a minute.
Flip side.
That's it.
Yeah, it's say goodbye. I mean, I cupped your breast in the middle of the night. Where are you now? We knew it was a bad idea even to talk about it. Now, just simply, or what did you get for having gotten rid of me? It's like, how dare you? And then, as I said a couple of weeks ago, there are some poems in both books to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I am dreadfully somber about those.
Mm-hmm.
There was a girl, there are a couple of poems in there, Duck 129. And I mean, it's a poem I'm very proud of and very fond of, but it doesn't make up for the crap I put her through. You know, you write a pretty poem, put a bow on it, and it's like, yeah, but I had to endure you for 2 or 3 years, and you were a little butt. So, you know, it's not the cosmos.
Right.
It's not everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'll say this now, you didn't ask. One thing that I think I have to remind myself is don't take it so seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Get some irony in the poem before somebody puts it there for you.
Oh, yeah,
And that's a bad love poem that doesn't have an eye out to alternative failures.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a poet needs to pull up before he plows right into the earth. And be, or at least show the reader that I'm in control of this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
not just ripping my heart here. Let me disembowel myself for you. It's like, well, that's going to be about as pretty as it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that I do try that in some of the poems.
Yeah.
You know?
And it gives it that extra layer.
Yeah, I don't mind if some former love of mine reads one of these and goes, "Ow." I'm going, yeah, ow. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, double. Same to you. Who was it? The British have a saying, same to you, old boy with knobs. So just put some knobs on it. That's it. But I'm unrepentant about adoring my wife's slumbering form, and she can be embarrassed. She just, she's afraid that if she comes to reading, there'd be like a spotlight on her, and they'll all turn around and go, like, there she is. That's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows? You don't know. When you get up there at the podium, you might say something.
Yeah.
Ken and I were really carrying on at Howlers and Yawpers a couple of months ago. I think we were embarrassing. We're embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I was just playing. So if Rita were in the audience, I might say something ridiculous. And these are at least seasoned words.
Mm-hmm.
I also think I'm hilarious. So
Yeah, you got fans. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't get the laugh lines I think I deserve. They're just like, that's clever, damn it. Jesus. How are you supposed to write about a hanging as we did a couple of years ago at the Guthrie readings? I said, really? We all trooped up there and read hanging poems. Oh my Lord. I'm supposed to put a little irony onto that. So, Alan Barreca, a South Tulsa poet, is a very, very good ironist. I think I really like that wit in his poetry. You know what I'll say this about Ken.
Mm-hmm.
He is so honest.
Yeah.
He's got his heart out there. And they're like, say hello. You're gonna get squashed. I mean, sometimes I read his stuff and I feel like I'm reading a teenage boy in love.
Hmm.
He could be writing about raccoons, but just
Mm-hmm.
like, wow. I'm getting the chills just thinking about it. I'm like, God, I don't think I can go there. I don't think I can write a poem that honest. Oof.
Yeah, it's definitely that.
But then, I'm
vulnerability.
kind of a shy person. So, yeah, when Ken gets up there and he does that, it's like, wow. But that's why,
Mm-hmm.
I don't read 50 books by John Yozzo. That's why I'm kind of pre-reading and rereading a stack for Scissortail, so I can kind of be up on the ones I bought and read, and then see who's coming back this year. it was kind of neat because I spilled a cup of coffee and a bunch of our coffee stained. So how's this one coffee stained? Oh, on the bottom, how this one got splotches on it.
Yep.
So I've been using books to advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, what's one from the book that you like?
Oh, I'd marked Greg's Side.
Can't go wrong talking to mom and dad.
Yeah. And then maybe Power Outage.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's a small poem, really.
Yeah.
What's that say? What's it?
It was just it's on
20.
20.
I remember writing that. Let me read it to you.
Sure. Yeah.
And also, every time I say outage, I'm going to say outrage. Power outrage. Just, for the fun. Power outage. After love, the words failed. You rescued me from a year there was not a thing to say. Neither thank you nor please love only me. As you were then loving me, I was then loving you when words went away. When tomorrow's afternoon shied away from memories and need for dreams. See, that's a hurt poem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rescue poem.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of my sea cow poem.
Mm-hmm.
I challenge, looks right into the camera, I challenge all you other poets to write a Manatee love poem.
Yep.
Yeah,
Put that out there. We're putting out a call.
Can you see a chapbook of that? Manatee love poems. We can probably get 20 or 30 together.
I mean, anything's possible. You just never know. What do you think reading poetry does for the listener? I'm thinking of public readings like Scissortail or with the Guthrie Festival.
I don't know. I read maybe 3 or 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy is, maybe she'd like to sell a few more books, but I'm not that, I can't. She said, just pick up the phone, call a library, go, I have a reading at the winery this year, and
Mm-hmm.
a reading in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is not my territory, but then neither is Tulsa. Tulsa's a weird venue. Tulsa has the TU crowd, and I'm not part of that. I'm part of the TU writing crowd. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm disappointed that, many poets don't read their stuff well.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wish, you simply at a drama school where you just give these to people who know how to read, know how to breathe.
Yeah.
I don't pretend that I read my poems well. I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't know what people get. I do try to speak into the microphone, and I do try to put on a little bit of a show, but I don't know. And then the Guthrie is weird because we're talking political, and we don't know who's out in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not someone to get up there and go, fuck Trump, but I've heard that.
Yeah.
I'll get up there, I have a poem about him, I'm a bald man. Bald men are realistic about their hair. Anyone who's not realistic about his hair is a phony. That's about as rock throwing as I get. And yet somebody's in this day and age likely to get all thin skinned about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what people get. And I realize I'm going to read political poems in Scissortail this year.
Mm-hmm.
They sound kind of preachy.
Mm-hmm.
How do we love you? It's just, I sound a little preachy.
Yeah.
I'm going to try. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a place to try things out. Do you think, do people, after you read, do your peers come up to you and give you feedback?
I don't welcome it, so
yeah.
I'd say no.
Okay.
Maybe I just put on the face like, thanks for having me, but
mm-hmm.
No. See, that's the thing. It's kind of like take it or leave it. There are bad times and others. Maybe not the best reading, But no, I don't think we need to critique.
Mhm.
I think the best thing is, and I love it, I said you can make a friend for life, $5 bill,
Mhm.
if that's what they're asking. I mean, like I'll give you $5 for your $15 book of poems, and but you go up to a poet afterwards and say, sign my book, here, thanks.
Mhm.
And then if he didn't do the best reading, and there are some very quiet voices in
Mhm.
readings, then you can read it your way. But at least you have. I don't know. I don't go to readings. I'm not reading at myself. But then Scissortail, God, there's so many fantastic.
Yeah.
The Texas crowd didn't make it to Albuquerque this year. I think the conference is getting too pricey. And I'm sorry because there's some very good voices.
Yeah.
But
In the community, I mean, it's, I've just been there once and I'll be there again this year, but observing other people who seem to kind of know each other, maybe they only see each other once a year or once every so often, but the Oklahoma literary community seems pretty tight knit. Do you get that sense from
yeah,
things like
well,
Scissortail or?
Scissortail is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I don't frequent Oklahoma City, so I don't know. I know Terry is Terry Cummings is constantly working, constantly here, constantly there.
Yeah.
Bill Boudreau, who sends out the calls.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot going on. Oklahoma City seems a little bit better about centralizing than Tulsa, but then sometimes I just say, I don't think I went to a reading 7, 8 years ago. It was a TU professor and his darlings, and they did some good poems, but if I remember, it's like a 3-hour reading. So every one of them got to read 2 or 3 poems and go like, yeah, but there are 20 names on this list. And then of course he was going to get up and read for 30 or 45 minutes. So we were there till 11:30 at night. Wow. And then a handful of us went off and had a really nice dinner and beers and stuff at McNally's. But I'm thinking, you have to be aware of your audience. You can wear them out.
Yeah. So what's nice about Scissortail, it's 15 minutes. You get your time and you get a break, and then there's the next.
I'm only sorry. I'm going to miss. There aren't too many overlaps, but I'm going to miss a good friend of mine, Randy Pruss. He had me down to read at Southeastern in 1996, and I always appreciated that he did that. I haven't seen him many times. He and I are reading, against each other at Scissortail. So sorry for that. Haven't seen him in 10 or 15 years. See how he's held up, Yeah. That kind of stuff. I helped hire Ken in 2000. He came up in summer of 2000. We hired him, so he's been at East Central since then. I remember that. And I don't know. I'll go. I love what Jessica does, how she does it. She's a performer. And I know she's so damn busy, but I keep waiting, like, come on, Jessica, let's have some more books. But she's holding down 8 different positions at school. And then, simply, I don't know how poets write, how fast, how slow. Most of the poems in this book, I had 200 poems to go into the first book. And I chose that in 95. And I did not anticipate a second book. I didn't. Decide. I got 1 book. I thought, well, we're going to edit this thing so I have a clean copy of it someday. It's just, my crankiness. Like I said, I used to flog students for less. So I didn't know I'd have a second book. And I think Terry, if I read her, she said something about a third. Oh. Well, I have thousands of poems that I've been writing since I was 17. I have no idea if I'll dig beyond 20 years, the last 20 years.
Yeah. So this new book, Echoes and Omens. Is there anything from this book that you want to read today or talk about, or is it ready?
I didn't bring a poem to read.
Okay.
I don't know. I'd have to look for a little bit. Maybe
Yeah.
you could edit out the time it takes me, I guess. There literally are echoes. Don't intend them. Having studied James Joyce, I can be too much of puzzles, but I don't play the puzzles. But I could draw a lot of interesting diagrams of what echoes one, what echoes another. There's a poem in here called Cana, and it does allude in voice and echo to a poem, and I'm not sure what the final title, Denver, that I wrote about a street person asking me for a cigarette. And I said, thanklessly gliding by another bleeding Christ. And so in Cana, a poem that alludes, of course, to the first miracle of Jesus, kind of a complaint to his mother. Everybody wants something from me. You know, you have what you need, but you ask the question wrong. So there are echoes, of course, but then there are echoes of love poems. I mean, because some of these, there's a poem in there that I wrote to Rita, and here's a poem here that I wrote to Rita the next day in the same mood over the same disagreement, perhaps. And so, so that there's a lot of dovetailing. But it's just at the time, 2 years ago, I was picking only one day. I was just thinking, I'm going to go with that one. There are more effusive poems in Only Wonder. I guess I was I think I only used the word fuck in this one, and it's in anger, not erotic, you know, but there's a different kind of wild.
Yeah.
I like the poem about, I borrowed the title from a friend of mine in Texas. It's called Taking Stock. And it's the looking in the mirror poem and look at the wreckage. And it kind of fits that barrel on the front cover.
Yeah.
That's but no, they're love poems. I'm going to take a look at them. And I read them all yesterday, day before, looking for mistakes, looking to get this thing cleaned up. How many people have you already interviewed?
33.
Good grief. Did they say things like, you know, we strain at wisdom, you know, we want to be smart, we want to think like we're really saying something people need to hear. Here's a title I'm kind of proud of. It's the title.
Okay. Yeah.
Asleep, her breasts gather like slumbering cubs, tucked teeth and claws, all furred. That's 101.
Oh.
You know, it's kind of like, I'm going to put that in there. Must be true. Lights out for Brady with the monster in the closet. I've got some nonsense lyric. Yeah, see, I can't find the poems I would read right now. I just can't find it. Courtship, 106 is a haiku about these Daisy Duke shorts Rita used to wear.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I got her date 2, date number 2.
What?
Encourage you to ask her out.
Well, because we went to Brahms for a second date because our friends who had just gotten married they were these very noisy people, and so they were literally just having at each other in the bedroom. I said, let's get out of here. Let's just go. There's kind of people who have to exclaim everything to you.
Mm-hmm.
At least one of Rita is kind of depressing. There are some depressing ones.
Mm-hmm.
Banana Land's pretty nice. It's a Rita poem. When we were younger. Okay, I'm thinking of one, but I can't seem to find it.
Oh, it's okay.
Anchor underground. There's a lot of imagery of Lake Ponca. Just probably 3 or 4 or 5 poems about harbors and woods that are part of it. I can't seem to find the poem I'm thinking about. I like Patronym 53. It's to my grandfather. Curious how that might go for the family, because my grandfather went to prison for bootlegging, and it destroyed my father's parents' marriage. And it was just not a happy time. My dad the military saved my dad. Otherwise he would have been a street urchin, retrospective. I don't know, I can't seem to find it.
Oh, yeah.
I'll read Preachment 64. I wrote it for the passing of my professor's wife. I didn't know his wife, too well, but she had a very arch personality. She had a very wry way of looking at things. And so, and he loves it. I mean, he was very pleased when I showed him an early copy of it. Changed a couple of words. And I gave him one of these last week. So it's not disrespectful, but her way of looking at things was pretty European dark. If you ask me, he might argue a little bit or amend it. And so, of course, as many university types end up, when they need a funeral, they go to the Universalist crowd because they're not really about. So this is for Tanya. And at first, what was the title before? Well, I just had for Tanya, and I just thought Preachment. We need you now more than ever to be here in body and person to lead this universalist love around to some conclusions. Yes, all sorts of good reasons to set the departed aside out of sight, prop up a big smiling photo on a shiny easel. But today needs you now, not smiling necessarily, archly perhaps, to contest this unitary no soul left behind bent of cosmos. Some of these need be left, will be left, specifically now. You no longer lead us here. We dumbly mingling, your book club over there, your art clash here, colleagues from the university smattering about. You belong here. You are our center. We stare across spaces of a clean white room, prefer to munch cookies rather than to commune. Cows on our cuds, free range and lost. That's a reference to Robinson Jeffers' poem about how cows just nudge the dead one and comprehend about as much. Anyway.
What's the best writing advice that you can give to other poets?
Don't take it too seriously. Get some irony in there. Let the reader know that you're in control of even your deepest emotions. Otherwise, it's just, unbridled self-pity, I guess. We all get our hearts broken, and some of us get them exquisitely crushed. A simile, like a boiled tomato. Peeled boiled tomato. Yeah. Just imagine how that's going to sound. Yeah, that happens. I mean, it's not to diminish people who never quite find love. But in order to find it, you're going to get your ass kicked all the way up the ladder. And it doesn't mean that everybody's happy. You know, it's kind of like I feel very fortunate to have had the career I had.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I deserve a job? How did I get a job over 289 other applicants? How's that work? You know,
Mm-hmm.
you get your opportunity at a place like East Central, you work your ass off. And you hope that they're playing by their sets of rules. You hope you get evaluated properly, and you hope you rise. And, you hope you get a little money along the way. But I mean, I know it's luck. And I know that at love, it's been like that. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to go be the best person in love.
Right.
No, Rita and I sensed each other. We were lucky. Didn't mean I didn't meet quality women until that time. It's just, there was no talk of marriage when I was 20, no matter how. My first heartbreak, I was 17, she was 15. That's when my dad died and had to move back home. I mean, just not to blame anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was real enough to hurt like hell then, you know. But what was I going to say? Let's meet up in 10 years, see how it goes. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
I dated one girl who wanted me at age 21 to be 31 and all done and ready to go. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
Timing matters.
timing does matter. It just seems like a crap game sometimes. And I've been very fortunate. I do want to say, as far as my poetry, I owe so much to Dorothy and Terry. And there have been others, but then there were ones, 2 years ago, Dorothy was in my face at Scissortown and said, okay, are you about ready? Or I don't know how she said it, but stop fucking around.
It sounds like her.
There's no guarantee that I'm going to keep fucking around. I don't know what motivates me. I want to get the words right, but, I'll tell you one way to get people off your Christmas list. Do like I did. Move your poems around. Then you don't hear back from people. I was thinking, what the hell happened? Did they read all the way through? There's something in there for them. I don't know. But I'm thinking there's something in there for many, many people. When I'm gone, just like one of these books, you pull something out, something ideally will speak to you. But the real sad truth of it is, we will all be stardust in 5 billion years anyway. So every book, every lock of hair, every eyeball, it's just going to be disintegrated. We'll be so everything we worry about now. So I think I advise people to read poetry aloud, even badly. Do like I did when I proofread, just buzz through it. But
Listen.
the poets are in the ears if they're doing their job right. I think, do we want to be wise? Yeah, I guess, but we also have to have some music. I think it is music fun. So, there are falling rhythms in my poems. Banana Land in the new book has some of the same rhythms as like Marry Me does. And then I forget the poem about, I forget the titles because I changed them, about the stealing water. I think that's maybe the poem Stealing Water. And so there's falling rhythms in there on purpose. So Banana Land is another poem of the falling rhythm. And I don't punctuate much. First book, Terry had some trouble. She was like, oh my God, I forgot to punctuate. I said, I don't punctuate. So the second one is much easier.
Yeah.
Because I expect the reader to invest his effort, assuming, of course, a literate audience and someone who understands language, to know that you can put line 2 with line 3, but line 3 could also fit with line 4. And syntax is a beautiful thing. So there's that. But some lines have to be read the way they're read because English has its notorious rhythms. So I don't think I asked too much. But a friend of mine, good friend of mine, did say my poems need to be seen as well as heard sometimes. Fair enough. Maybe. I don't know. See, I think I'm an amateur among professionals with that list of people. I don't know. I'm not asking some graduate student to take my book apart and tell me what he thinks about it, because those days are done. When I retired, I threw away my critical prose. It didn't hurt. I thought, oh my God, I need to keep this. Why? So something like that. Nobody unless somebody who's interested will read. No.
Hidden away in the archives.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today, or?
No, I just wish more people appreciated my Manatee poem.
We'll put that call out. We'll send an announcement.
I challenge you.
It's a challenge.
And I don't know why it goes to pirates. I don't know why it ends up, except I think pirates actually, or people at sea too long actually thought a manatee looked like a mermaid, or was a mermaid.
Right.
I think they're really cute, but I don't mistake them for fish women. I don't really. But I mean, I just the idea of dribbling a manatee is kind of cute. And of course, I think I got the sounds right, but I've never met one. I don't know if they chuckle or bark or whatever. So I think I've told people, don't worry about having the serious stuff. Just read my Manatee love poem.
Okay.
You know, there's probably a girl somewhere which I wish you'd written this about me. You know, just like, yeah. That's the stuff. Yeah, right. Good luck with your project.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time and
thankless work.
Yeah.
No, you flattered me. So
yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.